Hello everybody, it's me, Rizo2612, and today I am doing a director's commentary on the Free For All Heroes vs. Villains World Tournament Round 4 from Part 1 all the way to Part 3. And there is a few points that I need to point out before I start the commentary. The reason why I didn't start working on the director's commentary as soon as Round 4 Part 3 came out back in September the 19th was because at the time I was busy getting my Halloween music videos ready for last month in October to celebrate Halloween and whatnot and everything. So yeah. And also because of college was getting in the way and lots of real life events had been getting in the way, but I managed to get everything out of the way, and now I have spare time on my hands now since it's November and everything, and I have at least very little college projects to do, but I will be back on track to doing a lot more college projects in the future, and I'll be doing a lot more projects on DeviantArt sooner and all that stuff. So yeah. And so yep. And I'll also like to tell you about the reason why that it took ages for each of installments of round 4, part 1, part 2, and part 3 got why did it take me ages to get them prepared and all that was because by the time in I believe in July or in August I was moving on from Windows 7 to Windows 10 because I'm not sure if any of you lot know this, but I'll explain it anyway. I found out recently on the internet that I'm assuming it could be possible that it might happen. I'm just saying it sounds possible it might happen, but I'm not going to make it sound like it's the end of the world kind of thing for those that use Windows 7. But if you do use Windows 7, I would recommend you to move on to Windows 10 because Windows 7 is going to no longer going to be a thing anymore, and modernization will start up for Windows 10. Like everyone who's using Windows 7 will be recommended to be using Windows 10 before Windows 7 becomes a thing in the past, because by the end of I think it was the end of January next year, at the start of next year, Windows 7 is no longer going to be a thing and all that. And Windows 10 is going to be the main operating system that would be more usable than Windows 7, I think. Kind of like how Windows XP used to be a thing in the past, but it's no longer a thing anymore nowadays. So, yeah. But anyways, and all that kind of stuff. And aside from that, I had to take me time on working on other projects as well, because after I finished working on round 4 part 2 at the time and managed to get very little of round 4 part 3 almost finished up and running, I was starting to work on the first set of Halloween music videos so that I could be ahead of schedule in order for me to try and step up my schedule for YouTube, because of a lot of real life stuff were in the way at the time and everything. Like, I have a busy life outside on social media and all that stuff, but whatever. So yeah, and that explains why that it took ages for each part of round 4 to be released. Like, round 4 part 1 was released on the 25th of May, and part 2 was released on the 27th of July, and round 4 part 3 was released on the 19th of September. So yeah. And the reason I would have done, I didn't get the chance to get the director's commentary up and running last month was because I was releasing all of my Halloween music videos that I had made in order for me to make sure that they're all prepared and on time for Halloween last month, because of how much I enjoy Halloween. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started with the director's commentary on Round 4, Part 1. And we start off with Judge Claude Frollo, Captain Hook, and Sarouge receiving a visitor, which is Ratcliffe from Disney's Pocahontas. And I also forgot to point out, as soon as the prologue started, that at the time when I released Round 4 Part 1, I had to ended up re-uploading it on the YouTube. It was because originally I was going to use a music track at one point that ended up being issued to be copyright claimed, so I decided to scratch that and used a different music track from Kingdom Hearts instead. So yeah, that explains why that I had to re-upload the first installment of Round 4 on and all that stuff. Anyway, back on topic. Darkseid forms an alliance with Vanos to take on any heroes that could pose a threat to their plans. Meanwhile, Aladdin and Prince Philip team up with Peter Pan. Not so much to say here, but although it was worth it to see Peter Pan again in from back in, I believe it was Round 3 and everything, so yep. Meanwhile, Quasimodo teams up with Esmeralda and Phoebus following the events after their fight with Captain Hook. The first fight to the round is the Beast versus Mosenrath. Not so much to say here, but although basically Jafar recruits Mosenrath to be his second in command to his rule over Agrabah after Bowser had driven Aladdin out of Agrabah ever since he captured Jasmine, and this gave Jafar the opportunity to take over Agrabah. And to test out his new ally, he sends Mosenrath to capture Belle, who is one of the few princesses in the series, and everything. This fight was inspired by the Evil Queen versus the Beast from Disney Heroes vs. Villains. And that's where I got the idea of having Mosenrath be the one to capture Belle and everything. So, yeah. Next up is the Hulk versus the Evil Queen, which is one of my favorite fights of the round so far, because basically what I had in mind for the Evil Queen's first fight was to have the Queen summon this griffin kind of like monster. I think it's a griffin anyway. So like this griffin monster that she had as a minion to aid her in her little like fight against the Hulk, so that she will turn the Hulk against the Justice League and the Avengers later on throughout the series. And I will make this canon that the Evil Queen knows Mosenrath, and Mosenrath was the one that gave her the griffin, which explains why throughout most of the fight it was the griffin fighting for the Evil Queen, because she may not like have a lot of like fight footage wise, but I figure out what to do with her. Like, she would just mostly, like, summon monsters to do her bidding and all that. And here, in case you're confused what happened, the evil queen ordered the griffin to back away, and she cast a mind control spell on the Hulk. And that explains why the Hulk looks confused towards the end of the fight there. Next up is Mickey, Donald, and Goofy versus Nightmare Moon and the Shocker. This fight was made to test out Nightmare Moon and the Shocker's fight footage for future fights and future rounds to feature them, and also to bring back Mickey, Donald, and Goofy from, I believe, round 1, because of I think they, as far as I could remember, they didn't had any screen time in round 2 or round 3 or something like that. But at least that in this fight, it made up for where were they this entire time. So yeah. Not a lot to say here, but although I did use a little bit of footage of Mickey from one of the cartoons that was featured in Mickey's House of Villains, because I didn't know what other footage of Mickey Mouse to use. So yeah, but overall the fight turned out very well, and I'm pleased with it. Love Jim Cummings as the Shocker in Spider-Man the Animated Series. Next up is Simba versus Queen Chrysalis. The fight was made to develop a storyline of how Scar and Shere Khan took over the Pride Lands, and I had this idea of them hiring Queen Chrysalis and her army of the Changelings to invade the Pride Lands for them, to drive Simba, Timon, Pumbaa, and Nala out of their home. And and I'm pretty pleased with how well her introduction fight turned out and everything. So yeah. And I just love how the Simba's Pride fights off against the Changelings in the background while Simba takes on Queen Chrysalis himself, but he finds himself overpowered by her. I guess I could point out that Queen Chrysalis, of all the MOP villains besides the Dazzlings and Midnight Sparkle from My Little Pony Equestria Girls, is one of my main favorite My Little Pony Friendship is Magic villains. And here we are in Mowgli, Baloo, and Bagheera versus Pete. Not much to say here, but although this fight was made to introduce the four of them, and yeah. And I really like this, like the outcome of it. At first, the original ending to this fight was gonna have Pete's defeat sequence from Mickey, Donald, and Goofy's The Three Musketeers movie, but I ended up using the Prince and the Pauper version of Pete's defeat instead. So yeah. Moving on to the interludes. Scar, Shere Khan move into the Pride Lands to take over, and Queen Chrysalis informs them about the outcome of the battle of the invasion in the Pride Lands, and she reveals to them that she also gathered 2 extra allies to aid them in their quest to rule the jungle, which are Zira and Ka. Pretty pleased with how well the interlude fits well with the music here. Excuse me. Meanwhile, the Joker learns about the Shocker's fight against Mickey, Donald, and Goofy and recruits him to his and the Green Goblin's criminal empire, and the Shocker accepts. At the Forbidden Mountains, Maleficent, Dr. Robotnik, Dr. Doom, Jafar, Loki, and Bowser received an interesting statue of Discord by Captain Hook. I wanted to make it like canon that after Captain Hook gives the statue to Bowser, Robotnik, Jafar, Maleficent, Loki, and Doom, that they paid him for getting them the statue of Discord in order for to boost up the number of villains in the war between heroes and villains. And here we have Simba and 26 teaming up. And not a lot to say here, but it's good to see 26 and her friends again. Which reminds me that I might have to rewatch Dinotopia Quest for the Ruby Sunstone again, because I hadn't seen that film in a long time. Meanwhile, Tony Stark / Iron Man informs the Avengers about the Justice League and how they could propose an alliance. However, what they don't know is that the Hulk is actually now a spy working for the Evil Queen and the Enchantress in order to give them information about what the Avengers' next move is and what the other heroes' next moves are. Moving on to part 2. And here we have the summoning of Discord following the events after Captain Hook got paid by Bowser, Robotnik, Jafar, Maleficent, and Dr. Doom alongside Loki. Sorry. They were given the statue by Hook, and after they paid him, they decided to awaken Discord from the statue. Not so much here, but although a very good introduction to Discord in my opinion.
Chaos is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Oh, that's good. That's very good indeed.
Meanwhile, the Avengers and the Avengers and the Justice League come to agreement to team up, and pardon me, and they all don't know still that the Hulk is under the Evil Queen's spell, but Superman starts to be suspicious about the Hulk, which would lead up to an interesting story arc. Meanwhile, Nightmare Moon and Queen Chrysalis arrive at an interesting graveyard, and they find a very deadly corpse, and they see that it has potential. Meanwhile, Bruce Banner, who is the Hulk, who is also still under control of the Evil Queen's spell, informs her about the team-up, and the Queen decides to end this once and for all by sending the Enchantress to hire someone to take both the Justice League and the Avengers down. Meanwhile, Captain Hook meets up with his two old friends, Gaston and Herman Cortez. I want to make it canon that in my series here that Hook is an old friend of both Gaston and Herman Cortez, which explains why I thought that in the description it would be worth it mentioning that they were old friends and all that. So I just wanted to make it canon, so yeah. And Hook pays them a heavy amount of treasure and gold. Yeah, and gold to in exchange for them to be part of Frollo's team. And here we are on the first fight: Aladdin, Peter Pan, and Prince Philip versus Bowser. This fight was kind of tricky to work on, but I decided to end it with the genie fighting off against Bowser and everything, because I thought he deserves a chance to do some fighting and all that. And the genie blew up Bowser's Doom ship. And Bowser was about to do something brutal to the genie, but the genie manages to shut him up. I guess I could also point out that the genie is one of my favorite Disney characters and all that. But not like number one on the list, because that deserves to be Captain Hook on the list, because Captain Hook is like my number one favorite Disney character of all time, not just my number one favorite Disney villain. Anyway, Taran versus Mysterio. This fight was inspired by Taran versus Rothbart from Heroes vs. Villains series by CQ Primo 7, and I thought I would do Taran's introduction fight similar to his introduction in Heroes vs. Villains, but instead of him facing a non-Disney villain, he ends up facing a Marvel Comics villain, which I think it would be pretty interesting in my opinion. So yeah. And basically the reason that the Griffins are in this was that Mysterio brings them with him to capture Henwin while he deals with Taran and all that. Although he didn't do much of the fighting, but it's still alright. I mean, it's cool. Next is Batman, Spider-Man, and Iron Man versus the Scorpion, the Riddler, and the Penguin. Basically, the Enchantress pays a visit to the Joker and the Green Goblin to hire 3 or 2 criminals to take down a few members of the Justice League and the Avengers. And the Riddler suggests that this could be an opportunity to test out the Scorpion and the Penguin, which the Enchantress, Joker, and Green Goblin agreed to, and this happens. Not so much to say here. Here we have Iron Man battling against the Penguin, while Spider-Man takes on the Riddler, and Batman fighting against Scorpion. Which is clever in my opinion, because I like the idea of the matchup and all that. Really love how Spider-Man dodges that hook for a second. And the Scorpion is the only one that is defeated. As for the Penguin and the Riddler, they kind of are, but then they just ended up retreated and they abandoned the Scorpion at the end of the fight, in case you're confused with the outcome at the end. So, yeah. But you will get to see the Scorpion again later on in the future, but I just haven't thought when and what's going to become of him in the future of the series. Next up is Buzz Lightyear versus Darkseid. And we have the fight started out with Darkseid and Vanos recruiting Zurg, World Dark Matter, and Tyler to their space fraction in order to take control of the entire galaxy alongside the other main villains like Bowser, Robotnik, Jafar, Maleficent, Loki, and Doom. However, Zurg warns them about that there is a possible threat that could be in their way, and that is Buzz Lightyear and his team known as Star Command. And Darkseid decides to take matters into his own hands. This fight was kind of a bit tricky to make Darkseid fight alone in this one, so I decided to have Tyler's forces aid Darkseid to battle against Buzz Lightyear and XR. So, yeah. I really love this bit. And after XR got blown up, the Unimind ends up being captured, and Darkseid finishes off Buzz Lightyear and he leaves. Now Julie versus Zurg. This fight was made to give Julie from Heavy Metal 2000 a interesting introduction, because I don't think in Heroes vs. Villains they gave her a similar introduction that would be almost like similar to how her introduction and role was in the movie that she's from in Heavy Metal 2000. So I wanted to like make her introduction look a bit like similar to make her introduction look similar to how she was introduced in the film, by having Zurg and World Dark Matter make their presence known in her home by taking out a few of the citizens, and also not only capturing Julie's sister, but also they also kill off her father in the progress of invading. So yeah. But Julie wouldn't have like a revenge story arc on Zurg or anything, but it sounds possible that she might, but I'm not sure. But who knows? I mean, just who knows? Yeah, not much to say here, but although it was a gruesome fate for Julie's father here, and yeah. And World Dark Matter just captured Terry, who is Julie's sister and all that. And in the interlude, after Zurg and his forces leave Julie's hometown or whatever, Julie survives the can't talk today, sorry, survives the damage and everything, and she teams up with Buzz Lightyear and his crew in order to face survival in space. Meanwhile, Princess Celestia forms an alliance with the Royal Council so that she could represent Equestria, which in my incarnation of the Royal Council fraction, I had this idea of what if each ruler represents their kingdom or land and all that. Like, we have Princess Celestia representing Equestria and King Acorn representing Mobius, which is pretty interesting. Meanwhile, in Robotnik's laboratory, Dr. Robotnik enlists the help of Dr. Doom and Dr. Draken to create two clones of Metal Sonic and Metal Robotnik. Like, the Metal Sonic and the Metal Robotnik you see here, if they were clones, those are the actual, the first, clones that Robotnik plans to send to another dimension, which you'll find out, which, I'll explain in the next part, what is that next dimension and all that. And the real, Metal Sonic and Metal Robotnik, they have already been developed, and they are ready to battle sometime soon in the future, so, yeah. Meanwhile, Darkseid and Vanos and their forces make war plans with the Unimind. Moving along to part 3. Big shout out to Mario Floyd Dyke, I think that's how you say his name. He made the prologue for me, and he recommended me to use this music track for this crossover prologue of the alliance of the Masters of Evil with the Videoland Villains Alliance from the Worst Heroes vs. Villains Ever series. Like, because of it and all that, like, the idea came from the idea of these two alliances working together to cause destruction on the multiverse came from the idea of how in Disney vs. Anime Villains series, how Zurg plans to take control of the multiverse by invading every single dimension and all that. So yeah, and I wanted to make both my series, the 3-4 Heroes vs. Villains War Tournament, and Mario Floyd Deck's Worst Heroes vs. Villains War Ever series, like, canon together by making like a sudden like dimensional contact of those two villain teams together and all that. So yeah. Anyway, moving on is the Battle of the Native Lands. And this fight was inspired by the Battle of the Native Lands in Disney Heroes vs. Villains and the Battle of the Native Lands in Heroes vs. Villains. And I've planned to like I wanted to like give a good introduction to Pocahontas and John Smith at one point and all that. And so the whole idea of the Battle of the Native Lands came into my mind, and here it is. And I'm pretty pleased with how well it came out, and I'm glad that it came out differently to Secret Promise 7's Battle of the Native Lands and AC McKillerface's Battle of the Native Lands as well. And plus, I love how the music fits very well with this fight and all that. Kocoum, he didn't have like much development compared to the other two Battle of the Native Lands fights from both Heroes vs. Villains and Disney Heroes vs. Villains. So I decided to have him last a little bit longer by having him get killed off by like try to fight off against Captain Hook, but then Hook successfully kills him off. And yeah. Raven versus Shigo. This fight was made to introduce Shigo again after from the interlude in round 4 part 2 when she watches Draken, Robotnik and Dr. Doom develop the clones of Metal Sonic and Metal Robotnik before they were sent to the was Heroes vs. Villains War universe. And I wanted to give her like a really good fight and all, but although the fight didn't turn out well, but I think it turned out okay. Here we are with Sonic versus Professor Zoom, the Reverse Flash. And I also made it canon that Professor Zoom came from another dimension, which I'll explain like what dimension did he actually came from and why did he left in that dimension to cause destruction in this universe that he's in now while racing against Sonic sometime soon later. And I love the ending to the fight as well. Next up is Superman versus Whirlwind. Following the events after he learns about something suspicious is going on with Hulk and why he is going suspicious about him, Superman also learns about that there's another supervillain nearby that's hunting him down because he was hired by someone to take him down. And you'll find out who later. This fight was kind of tricky to work on as well, but I figured that I managed to get it to turn out pretty well. So yeah. And here we are on the last fight of the round. Twilight Sparkle and Friends versus General Ross. A second time of where Twilight Sparkle and her friends take on another Marvel villain. But this time it's General Ross. Find it common about this fight with her first fight with Loki and all that. I also love the bit of how the Hulkbusters managed to wake up Spike from like the massive like explosions, like of the gunshots and whatnot. And in case you couldn't understand what Rarity just said after she got like attacked or something, she was like, "It's on," and all that. Like that's what she was trying to say in the soundbite there, but oh well. Anyway, and the fight ends with Twilight and her friends overpowering General Ross, and he's not happy. Meanwhile, Whirlwind ends up in prison after his defeat from his fight against Superman, and there's an inmate that has potential with him, and he starts to reveal his plans of what he has in store for him. At the Pride Lands, Scar, Shere Khan, Zira, and Ka get a visit from Man-Ape from Marvel Comics. After watching some of the episodes that featured Man-Ape in the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, I thought to myself that I could feature him in the series and see what opponent is he best for to fight against and everything. So yeah. Meanwhile, in Professor Zoom's new fortress, Sonic is locked up while Dr. Doom reminds Professor Zoom that he still owes him a favor. But what Dr. Doom doesn't know is that Professor Zoom has other things in mind. Meanwhile, Tombstone meets up with Shigo and decides to pay her for a job that he plans to send her to. And meanwhile, Twilight and her friends return back to Mario, Luigi, Tails, and the others and inform them about their encounter with General Ross. And then Toad informs them about Sonic has been captured by Professor Zoom, because he had learned about that Sonic had been captured by Professor Zoom. And now they have to think of a plan to rescue him. And here is my favorite part, the epilogue, with the Masters of Evil no longer known as the Masters of Evil, because after Robotnik decides to recruit 4 more allies from another dimension, which are the Dazzlings, which is Adagio, Aria, Blaze, and Sonata, Midnight Sparkle, all 4 from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, but also from My Little Pony Equestria Girls. And all of them are now known as the Ultimate Master Planners of War. And the reason that I've changed the name was that because I'm planning to introduce the Masters of Evil from the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which I am confirming that now, that I'll be introducing them later on in the future of the series and all that. So yeah. Back on topic, Princess Celestia learns about the Ultimate Master Planners are now starting to take control of the multiverse. And here is a quick introduction to Batgirl, which at the time when I added that epilogue piece in, I thought I had already introduced Batgirl back in round 1 or something, but it turns out that I didn't. So this is actually her real introduction here. And here we have Nightmare Moon and Queen Chrysalis bringing the corpse back to life, and you will find out who it is soon. And meanwhile, Princess Celestia pays a visit to Team Mario and Sonic Alliance and informs them that she might have the answer to how they will get more allies to help them to rescue Sonic from being captured by Professor Zoom. and she brings them this mirror. I don't know what the name of it is, but whichever. In my case, it would have been like a dimensional mirror from the very first My Little Pony Equestria Girls film. And Princess Celestia summons the Rainbooms, which are Sunset, Shlimmer, Sci-Twi, and the Equestria Girls versions of Rainbow Dash, Rarity, Pinkie Pie, Applejack, and Fluttershy, and even Spike as well. So, yeah, they are officially part of the Team Mario and Sonic Alliance because of the whole multiverse storyline that I am very super excited to develop very well in the series. So yeah, that was my commentary on the Free For All Heroes vs. Villains World Tournament Round 4. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This has been Rizo2612 signing out.